Hello, and welcome to this first episode of our new podcast, Poetry Not PowerPoint. My name is John Brewer. I characterise myself as the conference bard. My work is I'm a part-time poet, full-time conference developer, and also here, as you see, a podcast host, or in this case, a co-host. The purpose of this podcast is to shine a light on some of the great poets that are out there and try and make a connection between the work they're doing as poets and the value it can deliver to businesses, organisations, individuals, and the like. So I'm delighted to have with me today, and for all future episodes when we will be having guest poets, my co-host, Kate Jenkinson, who is the founder of Next Step HR. She's a prominent leadership coach in the UK. But also, like me, a poet. So delighted to have you with us, Kate. And so perhaps if you could just say a few words about the work that you do by way of introduction, and then we'll launch into a discussion about poetry, each other's poetry, and away we go.
I'll keep the words about me very brief then, because that's the conversation I can't wait to have. Yes, so thank you, John, and I'm delighted to be here with your capable guidance and support. I am an executive coach by day and a performance poet by night, and I've always been drawn to poetry as a form of self-expression. Only recently, in 2016, really committing full time to making it a part of what I do in business as well. And then coining the phrase business poet, really, and reaching out and finding other people who have the similar passion of where do business and poetry overlap and how can they help each other.
And like me, you do. I mean, my sort of stock and trade is summaries of events,
Yes.
right? So I'll either chair or sit in on a business conference, and at the end replace the typical and unfortunately often rather dull conference summary with a poetry piece. You do that as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. So I call it a poetry finale or a spoken word finale, because spoken word seems to resonate with people in a different way. But yes, it's about creating in the moment and capturing sound bites and the emotions really that are conveyed in a nice, digestible format, which leaves people feeling really positive at the end of an event.
Yeah. It's certainly one of the things I've noticed with it as a medium in that context of conferences. And you said the word that emotional. That I think it's very difficult uh, to write a poem or perform a poem or a spoken word and it not have a large emotional component to it in a way that you can give a speech that we've all sat through speeches that have been a bit dry and emotionless, right?
True. And I think sometimes people just end up repeating the same kind of gratitude emotion without really picking up on the range of emotions that are being covered in an event. Spoken word poetry
Right.
just captures it beautifully.
Okay. So, what we're going to be doing in the weeks ahead, once we launch this podcast early in the fall, is we're going to have guests on who are going to join us, and they're going to share a poem they've written,
Yeah.
a short poem they've written. We're keeping them to 3 minutes or less,
Yes.
and also share a poem that's been an inspiration to them, or that they want to sort of highlight and share with the audience. So we're going to sort of model that to give
Yes.
the audience an idea of the format of the show, the arc of our conversations, and also those poets that we're going to be inviting. So I'd like to ask you first, Kate, to just, I know you have a poem you want to share with us, so if you could share that with us,
I do.
and we'll chat a little bit about that. Then I'll share my little poem, and then we'll get on to our own work. So
Yeah.
please share the poem.
Okay. So I did think really deeply about this, because I've moved on from this poem, but it was basically a turning point for me when I read it. And I just loved the irony in it. So without spoiling too much, I'm just going to read it. It's called Engineer's Corner, and it's by Wendy Cope. We make more fuss of ballads than of blueprints. That's why so many poets end up rich, while engineers scrape by in cheerless garrets. Who needs a bridge or dam? Who needs a ditch? Whereas the person who can write a sonnet has got it made. It's always been the way, for everybody knows that we need poems, and everybody reads them every day. Yes, life is hard if you choose engineering. You're sure to need another job as well. You'll have to plan your projects in the evenings instead of going out. It must be hell. While well-heeled poets ride around in Daimlers, you'll burn the midnight oil to earn a crust, with no hope of a statue in the Abbey, with no hope even of a modest bust. No wonder small boys dream of writing couplets and spurn the bike, the lorry, and the train. There's far too much encouragement for poets. That's why this country's going down the drain. I love it.
That's lovely. I think the sort of context for that was a complaint, I believe, or perhaps that's the wrong bit of complaint, but a comment by someone in engineering who felt that in Westminster Abbey there's a poets' corner where
Yes.
Various prominent poets are interred,
Yeah.
and there are little monuments to them. And this feeling we should be lauding our engineers in the same way.
Yes.
But it's a nice. I think it's a nice piece because it's. I know we were talking earlier about humour, and the piece I picked is also a humorous piece. There is a kind of way of injecting a humorous aspect, I think, to a lot of the poems, certainly than I do. And I know your work as well. That's an important part of it, right?
It's and actually often underestimated important part of business. Having a good sense of humour that is appropriate and that connects people, because that's what laughter does. And I just love the irony in that poem, if I'm honest, John. I worked at the time in an engineering organisation and was the HR manager, I think, and it just tickled me to read that poem at the time. As I was writing poetry.
Yeah, and I do think it's. Yeah.
Sorry.
And I'll be clear, we're neither of us anti-engineer.
Not at all. No, I love
We
the
won't be.
engineers I worked with. They were
No.
great.
Yeah, but I think it does also speak to why we're doing this podcast. That poets are people who are venerated in many ways. I mean, great poets.
Yes.
We all, Shakespeare and others, obviously. But somehow we don't think of them when we think about the everyday sort of business days that we live and the value they could bring in those situations.
Yeah. We kind of take it for granted, don't we? And it's a shame because just the levity or the ability to bring something to a common level for everybody is what poetry can do. There's a connection there. When I read that, I'm sure there were a few people listening who thought, yeah, I've experienced that. That's amusing. So it connects people.
Yeah. So perhaps I'll share my little piece then.
I would love to hear yours,
which is it's mercifully short and it's an anonymous poem. No one knows who wrote it, but it appeared apparently originally in 1944 on a radio show called In Celebration of Ignorance or something. So anyway, that's what it is. So and I have it in my mind. It is actually different to how if you see it written, it's different. It is. I eat my peas with honey. I have done all my life. It makes them taste quite funny, but it keeps them on the knife.
Love that.
And I picked this. It's something my father used to recite to me when I was a child.
Yeah.
And it stayed with me all these years. It didn't cause me to try eating my.
Did you not do it?
Nevertheless, the rhyme has stuck with me.
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I should try. Really, that would be one thing. So I think I chose that for a number of reasons, and the more I think about it, the more reasons I come up with. The first is, to me, firstly, it's that mnemonic function of poetry, right? So I mean, my work, the core of my work is in producing these verse summaries of events.
Yeah.
And I can go back to those that I wrote 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember them. I remember. There was one, for instance, we did on workplace culture. and there was this image of that someone was talking about cutting a cloud,
Yeah.
and I'd incorporated that into a verse,
Wow.
and I can see him on the stage when I go back and so there's a real and same with that poem. When I hear that poem, when I recite it,
Yeah.
I think of my father, right? I mean, I can't not, right?
Yeah.
So there's that mnemonic function of poetry. I think that whereas if you go back to your notes after a conference, they're meaningless, right? 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. There's nothing that.
So that was one aspect of it,
Yeah.
and the humour. The fact that it doesn't take itself too seriously,
Yeah.
right? So it's whimsical. I mean, it might be a sort of a UK thing. I don't know, but I think it's sort of vaguely funny.
It is funny. It's very
And yeah, and also the association with my father that he used to write these sort of doggerel verses for my kids when they were younger, and it was him doing that led me to try doing it at a conference. I remember I was out west doing an event, and it occurred to me I'd seen someone do a summary of one session at an event, and I thought, oh, I'll try doing the whole event. I wish I could do the whole event, and I'd written half of it overnight, and I phoned my dad in the morning and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and this is what I've got. And he said, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? That's just stupid. And so he wasn't always, terribly cuddly and encouraging, but,
no, but real,
much missed.
Yeah.
But he, so there's that sort of association with it as well. So in some ways that verse, if not the verse itself, the person who shared it with me first was an inspiration. Yeah. So.
And I think that
so a little bit more personal, I think, than
I was just going to say
than your choice of verse. Although I know
Well, is it? I mean,
yeah.
It's the comedy and the humour that connects, isn't it? So I've loved Wendy Cope's sense of humour, and the connection for me there was that it just resonated with what I learnt poetry could do when I was younger, and it was always the have fun, make you laugh, give you something to connect. And I'm sure people will resonate with that from when they saw poetry when they were younger. And I think what Wendy Cope does lovely is she does that in a mature way, so it makes it accessible as an adult as well. So there's a connection to experiencing comedic poetry when you're younger, but how does that apply in work? And I love the poem that just kind of brings together that idea of we can laugh at ourselves, but we can do it in a serious way, which means we should value people that can help us get through life and not take ourselves too seriously sometimes, and understand that has a value to it as well. And that's the adult message that I get from Wendy's poem even now, is that we should value the poetry and what it does for us and how it makes us feel and how it can help us get through difficult times. Yeah. So there is
a strong connection there.
Yeah.
That you mentioned with childhood as well. I mean, we encounter language through verse frequently, much more often as children.
Yeah.
Through nursery rhymes and songs and that's and even the sort of repetition of sort of pattern books that small kids have, and we sort of lose that as we get older, and it's almost like. But I think there's this sort of recognition now in business that play, and essentially poetry is play with words.
It is. Yes.
Is an important business tool in terms of creativity. And I know because I attended one of your workshops. I mean, you do, unlike me. I mean, you actually do workshops where you have leaders and the like actually write poems, haiku, and the like.
Yeah, but they don't know they're about to do that, do they, John? We keep that secret until the end. But you just told everyone now. Yes, and the thing is, what's amazing is if I were to tell people that's what they were about to do, they would have this automatic resistance to it, and not yet. Yes. When they've done it, they're absolutely delighted. And many people have said that is the first poem I've written as an adult, because we tend to do it when we're younger, but then we don't see the value of it as we get older, and they are inspired usually from those activities. So yes, I do that with leaders.
So I hope I've now just destroyed a whole part of your whole slice of your business
No, not
in
at
haiku
all.
phrase.
No.
But I'm a great lover of what I like to refer to as to about humour is the poor man's haiku, i.e.
Yeah.
the limerick.
Yeah, I love lyrics.
You know, where you've got something that's sort of like um, a real clear format that you have to stick to. But of course, the limerick is a vehicle for humour. You know,
Yes.
I don't know if anyone's ever written a serious. I mean, even if they're semi-serious, there's some humour to it. But I was quite struck because the haiku is something I would not have attempted, and I quite liked the one that I did when I was in that group with you.
Yeah.
So,
It,
which I think is how we met, isn't it? I mean, because I'd
yes.
seen some of your stuff online. You were doing this free workshop piece, so yeah,
We
yeah.
we met through LinkedIn, didn't we?
So
Yeah.
yes, we did, yeah. And I'd signed up for that piece you were doing, and I know some of our guests that we're going to have later on in this series. You know, some are sort of dedicated poets who perform, for specific events and the like. Whereas others are those that are one couple I think of who actively use poetry in not a dissimilar way to the way that you do. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in those conversations. So perhaps we should move on to because as we say, all our guests are going to be asked to share a poem that was inspiring to them, but also one of their own pieces of work. I know you brought a piece of work along today
Yes,
to share with us, so perhaps you could share that and we can chat a little bit about that as well.
I have. So, I've got a kind of before and after, so it's two pieces really, but they're definitely not longer than 3 minutes. So, um, during the first lockdown, I was moved to write this piece, which is called Emotional Economics. I can't help notice the beauty of the day, breathe the calm serenity of the night, and wonder at what it took to quiet the noise and still the busyness away. And on reflecting that it was fear and the wrench of loved ones lost, imagine how different our world would look if guided by our love and kindness instead. Then I could make sense of the horrific cost. Our future could be more meaningful if we employed emotional economics every day. Let's learn this lesson as fast as we had to take our freedoms away. And that was when everything stopped during the pandemic and it was still and quiet and there were very little noise. I don't know, you were maybe stood in your garden as I did and just heard the quietness. It was incredibly quiet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then recently, because we didn't learn our lesson, this was something that I wrote very recently. Busyness is seductive, sucks us into rumination despite our determination to be mindful. Busyness is addictive, makes us feel productive, feeds our activity with fresh dopamine hits, fills our thinking space as we seek another fix. This always on management creates an ecosystem of never getting the important work done, constant forgetting. Busyness kills our compassion, burns out inspiration, smokes our eyes, strokes our egos, sucks our souls dry. So we didn't learn our lesson, really, did we?
No, I think if there's one lesson we learned from someone said, I forgot who it was now. Someone quite famous, I think it might have been Churchill, said, the only thing you learn from history is that we never learn anything from history. that there's I see there's that bit, and just a couple of sort of observations and a couple of questions. I like the sort of opening of the first one because that idea of stillness
Yeah,
is you feel drawn into that, thinking, oh, this feels really nice, doesn't it?
yeah,
This is a nice, comfortable place to be,
yeah,
and yet in fact it's a stillness brought upon by, as you say, by fear.
yeah,
And I did a piece for I make the bold claim, which no one has yet challenged, that I am the only person to ever do a crowdsourced poem on LinkedIn, where I asked my network to share what they grieved. It was supposed to be about grief.
Yeah.
So the idea was, what did they grieve as a result of the pandemic? And one of my colleagues here, I do some work with. She said that she missed the sound of her house is near a schoolyard, and she missed the sound of the kids
Yeah.
during the day
Yeah.
running. I'm sure when the kids were running around, she probably wasn't too keen. But when it was gone, so I think that sort of that sense of on the one hand silence as being a kind of comfortable place, but also that sense of loss.
Yeah, it is. It's mixed, isn't it?
I,
Yeah. You notice the things you value more when they've
I,
gone, and poetry tends to bring that out, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also I think it's sort of very economical. I mean, the piece I'm going to share is not by coincidence is not that far from the second piece you did there. But
Yeah.
but again, that notion of what business, like if I was a presenter and I said, oh, we're all running around way too busy, we need to take more time off. I mean, it's sort of like a little bland, isn't it?
Yeah,
When
exactly.
you dig into some of those things, it's just the sort of dopamine piece, and then at the end with compassion. I'd be interested to know. Did you find yourself writing more during the pandemic?
I think I
Do you
wrote
think?
differently. I'm somebody who, if I
Yeah,
don't write, it affects my well-being, John. So I have to write. So I almost kind of force
yeah,
myself through prompts or workshops to make sure I'm writing. I wrote differently during the pandemic. I guess I noticed different things. And I write
yeah,
about business, organization, leadership. And during the pandemic, I think we had a real opportunity to evaluate what stillness and quiet and less productivity of the busy kind could do for us. And I actually enjoyed it, honestly.
yeah. Yeah, I found, from my point of view, I mean, I wrote a lot more because my stuff was very much tied to events. So,
Yes.
I would, the only poetry I was writing was these event summaries.
Yeah.
And of course, there weren't any events. So I then had to, and what I started doing was writing something every week for the people I worked with.
Okay.
But that wasn't sustainable
Yeah.
because it just became too much.
Yeah.
And so writing on demand like that, I just found a bit, but there was I definitely started writing a lot more and about more different things.
Yes.
Um,
You get,
and one question, because I think that, sorry,
I was going to say, did you just notice different things? Why was that? Why were you writing about different?
why was that? Well, uh, well, I was asked to, I think it was prompted, I was asked to write something for someone I was working with. She was retiring,
Yeah.
and I was asked to write something for her retirement, and it was nothing, and it was nothing, and I didn't even perform it. I just sent it in, and someone else read it out, and I didn't even think of performing it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I'd leap at the chance. And in fact, one of the last pieces I did before leaving that particular work was write something for someone's baby shower,
Yes.
but so it was like having been sort of prompted to do that, and that was actually just prior. It was just prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think that was the thing that sort of put into my mind that and then the client did a sort of a pseudo, like a fake. It wasn't a fake event; it was a proper event. But they threw it together very quickly
Yeah.
to see how it worked, doing something virtually. And the person organising it asked me just to come in and do a summary, because I'd never done a summary of anyone else's event,
Ah.
and it was only a day. And I sort of said, well, I'll go to the event, I'll attend it via Zoom, and I'll let you know 10 minutes before the end if I've got anything.
Yeah.
And I did have, and I did it, and it's online. So that's
You've
quite good.
just.
But one question.
I was going to say you just touched on something really interesting. That kind of almost, will the creative process deliver me something in this moment? And you put that caveat, if I've got something, I'll let you know. And it's really interesting because that's the risk and the kind of scary nature of being that conference poet, isn't it? That you have to produce something in a set time scale. You have to, the creativity has to work on demand. So
Yeah, and I think that pressure helps.
yes.
I mean, the last in-person event I did, I wasn't sure because it was a day, right? So it's a bit tricky when it's one day
Yeah.
versus 2 days, right? And I'd invited a friend of mine to come, friend and a colleague to come, and I turn up at the event, and he says, "Oh, I've told everyone at the table here about your poems, and they're really looking forward to it."
Oh,
And
there
it's like,
you are.
shit, why did you do that?
Yeah,
Now I have to do it,
yeah.
right? Um, and I like that sort of pressure. But one question I have,
Go on.
because it was the ending of your poem there,
Yeah.
right? When do you write the end? Do you write the end first? Because I write the ends first,
Oh, wow.
pretty much normally.
No, I don't, is the answer. I work my
You don't?
way
Okay.
I work my way to it through the emotions of the poem. So I am
Okay.
somebody who writes with emotions and sound as the main tools of my trade, and
Yeah.
the end line just happens. I don't think I've ever written the end line first,
Okay.
John. So
Nearly always I know where the end, how things going to end, and that's what I work to,
how
right?
amazing.
Pretty much. Like, so, I mean, for instance, I was at an event, and I remember this guy. It was talking about addiction,
Yeah.
and he had this line in his presentation, which was, "May you be challenged, but may you never be defeated." And I
Mm,
thought, oh right, that is a great line. Like, and it was sort of thrown away in the thing he was speaking. I thought,
yes.
what a great line to end an event with, to say, right, as
Brilliant.
you leave here, right, and it worked. And I stole it, because I feel as a poet, you can steal stuff. That's okay. I mean, I credited him actually. I didn't
And
include
you
his
didn't
name in the
steal
verse.
it.
Um, hmm?
You didn't steal
But
it. You
that's
honoured
it. So
it.
that, and that, when I know where I'm ending,
Yeah.
hmm? Sorry,
You honoured it. You honoured the words. You gave them a stature they deserved,
I
a
did.
platform. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's right. I didn't steal. I honoured. That's the way I'd like to look at it. So were those pieces written to perform, or were they just written just for your own sort of?
Now, this is it. Honestly, if I'm not writing, I know my well-being is suffering. So I wrote them because I observed this to be the case, and my emotions needed to be expressed. And that second
Yeah.
one, I was doing some work with a coaching client at the time around compassionate leadership. And there was a phrase in the book. So I can be prompted by a phrase, a bit like you there. The phrase that prompted
Mm-hmm.
that poem was busyness kills heart. So as a leader,
Right.
knowing that busyness kills people's organs, it stops them working. I felt that I had to capture that in some
Yes.
kind of poetry that would. It needs a platform. People need to hear that busyness is not a good thing, that it actually destroys people's
Yes.
well-being. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I have a riff in one of my pieces around, which is not dissimilar. And again, it was an event, and a very common phrase: do more with less.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean, to do more with less, and how that is? I mean, is essentially. I mean, it's not that far from busyness. But,
Yes. Yeah.
so perhaps I should just share my piece, because we're
Please
we're we're
do.
running close to our 30
Yes,
minute,
I'd love to hear
our
it.
somewhat flexible 30-minute timeline. So first thing I have to do, and this is an unfamiliar platform to me. I'm going to just share my screen
Okay.
briefly with everyone, so that we can see a graphic. This has a graphic. So for those of you who are consuming this conversation just in audio, this is a Banksy graffiti, and it's of a couple who are embracing as if they're about to kiss, but what they're actually doing is looking over each other's shoulders at their smartphones. And this was a piece that I think that when I first wrote during a wellness event, and workplace wellness event, and I was inspired by this image. And again, you'll see when we get to the end that I wrote the end first. I think this is a version of it that I just tweaked a little for an event around digital transformation. So there's some references to digital stuff, but essentially it's the same piece. And like it's the very end of it. So the whole piece is about 5 minutes, and this is the last sort of minute and a half. Okay, so here we go. Some say embrace the digital disruption. I fear it's more like digital corruption. What's happened to my span of attention, not to mention my powers of retention? Yes, it may help us as we work, but why is it so rare to just sit down and talk? You remember old school, face to face, the way it used to be for the human race. Look what's happened to the state of a nation. The UK now has a minister of social isolation because amidst our technology fixation, real human contacts become an aberration. Human plus smartphone is the new mutation, turning it off a form of deprivation. So think about the smartphone in your hand. It only costs you about £1,000. It's so powerful, so seductive, so light. The screen, it flickers, oh so bright. It's how I keep all my memories, connect with friends. I'm sure they'll all love me to the end. Who are they all, you ask? Who? To tell the truth, I haven't a clue. I collect friends like a philatelist stamps. Whoever has the most wins, they're the champ. It connects you to a world of news, but it can also lead you to the blues. Unlimited data you'll gain, but your soul you'll lose. You can turn it off, you know, if you choose. So wonder amidst all this networked wealth, what's the toll on your mental health? Try putting the phone to one side. Take a deep breath. Go play outside. Working all hours, hell for leather, ask yourself, is this a high-speed connection or is it a tether? We live in a world of infinite connection. Why then do I feel such a lack of direction, like I'm naked with no protection, alone, craving contact, some genuine affection? But when did I last give or get undivided attention? So please, I beg you, step away from that screen and reflect on the lesson of Banks's little scene. If ever you find yourself in a situation like this, forget the email, the text, the tweet, the pin, the post you just can't miss, and focus instead on the one you are about to kiss. So that's that.
Oh.
And as with all my things, it relies on bludgeoning people with rhyme. That's the thing. So.
We like rhyme. It works in spoken word all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really my only. It's like if the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
That's right.
And I know. I think it. And I think you suggested to me using some other format, and I was like, no, and it's not going to happen. The rhyme's simple. So that was basically the end of a conference.
Yeah. Love it.
And there've been presentations on isolation and digitization and things. So
it carries so much.
It's kind of a neat little ending, I think.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I listen. I don't take much in visually. The image is amazing, and some of the things that we've covered, John, in this podcast today could be prompts for other people to write their own responses. I would encourage people maybe to reflect on some of the things that we've covered, and how would they respond? What does that image say to them? What do some of the rhymes bring up in them? So yeah, I think it's been a really interesting introduction.
Yeah, no, and I kind of. Yeah, no, and I find that, like I say, as I mentioned before, when I kind of revisit these things, I can remember, the presentation.
Yes.
This one was a little different because I sort of inserted a bit of things that I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
But certainly, just as a mnemonic device, and the like, I think it has real value. So. Any sort of final thoughts before we close? Because we're a little over half an hour, and that's what we set ourselves as a target. And I've got a few words to close with. But anything you want to leave our audience with at this point?
More poetry, less PowerPoint. That's what I'd like to re-emphasise.
Well, that's the message,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I sometimes say to people, do you remember Amanda Gorman's PowerPoint at Biden's inauguration in 2020, and of course 2021, and of course people go, well, what are you talking about? Well, no, she didn't have a PowerPoint because the PowerPoint can get in the way of you connecting emotionally with an audience. And I hope that even in the little things we've shared here now, and I mean there's always like I say, there's always a high emotional content, and I think particularly when you're doing things virtually, but also in person, that emotional connection with spoken word is really valuable. So, okay, well, hopefully that's given people an idea of what we're doing here. It's been really great because although we've spoken a few times and sort of chatted on LinkedIn and stuff, this is the first time we've had an opportunity to sort of share our work with one another in this way. So I've really enjoyed it. And I hope it gives an idea of the format we have. We're going to, like the future episodes, will have guest poets who will share, so we'll get a bit more time with them than we've had with each other, because they'll be the focus of our conversation. They'll be sharing spoken word that they've performed and written and performed, their work with employers, as well as a piece that's inspired them. So with that, we'll close, and I look forward to interviewing our next guest in a week or so, and then publishing these in the fall. So, and if you're a poet out there and you're interested in being on the show, do reach out. Okay, thanks a lot, Kate. Absolutely, take care. Bye.